Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Strong Communities Select Committee. I think if we can start by introducing ourselves. I'm Jane Pratt, and I'm the member for Llanelli Hill, Gilwyn and Clydach.
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny.
Paula Harris, Democratic Services.
Anna Burkitt, Qualities in Welsh Language.
Anne Webb, I'm on this committee and I'm the member for St Albans and Tintern. Thank you.
Linda Guppy, member for Roggett, south of the county, and a member of this committee.
Richard Roden, member for Dixton with Osbaston and a member of this committee. Thank you.
And if we can now take apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies this morning from County Councillors Lisa Dimmock and Alan Davis.
Thank you very much. And I understand that Councillor Eason is hoping to join us shortly.
And Val Smith apparently is running late.
And Councillor Smith. Excellent. Okay, so are there any declarations of interest this morning? And we move on to agenda item 3, as there's no declarations of interest, which is the open public forum. I'm not aware of any members of the public being present today. And if we can confirm the meetings of the previous meetings, we had 2 meetings. If I can take, first of all, the meeting that was held on the 15th of February. And if I can ask, first of all, are there any items of any points of accuracy that members would want to raise? Or any other action points that anybody wants to highlight? Can I just mention that as we did meet for the Speed Awareness Task and Finish group this week, I was obviously just want to make the point that we were joined at this meeting by Mr. Peter Sutherland, and obviously we will be keeping Mr. Sutherland in the loop concerning future events and everybody else that we've that's involved. Okay, fine. So is everybody happy that I sign these as a true record? Thank you. Excellent. I'll sign that in a minute. And if I can now move on to the special meeting that was held on the 26th of February, which was the verbal update on the Mitchell Troy toilets and the item on civil parking enforcement. So is there anything that anybody would like to bring up about those minutes? Is everybody happy that I sign these as a true record?
I abstain, I wasn't present.
Councillor Guppy?
Neither of us have been was present.
Okay, how do we deal with that?
We could take them at the end of the meeting. Councillor Eason was present.
Yeah, we'll take them at the end when Councillor Eason joins us. So if we can now look at the action list, which is agenda item 5.
I don't think it's come out in the pack.
Okay, so I think it was, if you can just confirm, Hazel, the item that is on the action list from the meeting.
The 2 items, Chair, were the People Services, which you requested to come back for further scrutiny following the annual report that you scrutinised earlier in the year. We emailed members of the committee and asked them to come forward with some questions that they'd like to put to People Services following your request after you scrutinised it previously. We did have a list of questions from Councillor Davis and one from Val Smith, but we didn't have any others. So we'd like to set up a slot for you to have People Services back. But if you've got any further questions, it would be useful if you emailed them to us in advance so that we can put them to officers and they'll be prepared to answer them on the day. Whereas previously there were lots of questions that they couldn't provide answers on the day. The other item on the action list was the Speed Awareness Task Group, and we met this week We had a useful, productive meeting this week in which we brought to you a draft process for dealing with speed-related concerns. So that is just a draft, and it will need further discussion with the task group. But just to confirm that work is ongoing. Once we've got a final draft process, we will bring it through to this committee. But before we do that, we will hold a public workshop, and we will be inviting people with an interest in the subject. And Mr. Sutherland is one of those people that's requested to be invited. So that is going to happen before anything is agreed and endorsed by the Select Committee. So.
Thank you very much for that update. And can you confirm by in the email what date you'd like members' responses to the questions?
I think the deadline that we gave has passed, but that's not a problem. If you could email us, say, in the next sort of 2 weeks with questions that you would like to put to People Services. Councillor Davis gave us quite a full list of questions, which is quite helpful. So we do have a framework, but I know there were lots of points that were raised at the time. So in order to get those officers specifically back without a revised report, it is more of a question and answer session. So really we need those in advance. Councillor Eason, just to update you that we were on the action list, and we were saying that we wanted to invite People Services back following the scrutiny earlier in the year of their annual report, and members had highlighted some questions that they had for the officers, and they'd like Tracy Harry to return to the Select Committee. So if you've got those questions, please email us, myself and Paula, over the next sort of fortnight or so with points, because there were certainly concerns around sickness absence and return to works and those kind of things. And Councillor Davis has picked up some of those points, but please, if anybody's got questions, it's better that we can give them to officers in advance so that they're fully prepared when they attend. Okay.
Sorry I was late. I was in a little meeting earlier on, so I'm here now.
Thank you. And if you'd just like to introduce yourself for the benefit of those watching online.
For those who saw me just come in, I'm Councillor Eason, Dewstor Ward, Caldecott, member of the committee.
Thank you. And I think it would be helpful if we could send out another email asking for those further questions for the benefit of those members that aren't able to be with us today. If I can just go back briefly to the minutes of the the special meeting that was held on the 26th of February concerning the Mitchell Troy toilets and the civil parking enforcement. If I could ask for your help with this, Councillor Eason, because I think you were the only one that attended this meeting. Are you able to confirm with me that these are an accurate record of the meeting? Yes. And were there any amendments or changes that you thought were necessary?
It's to do with the toilets in, I think that basically it's a cut and dry situation. We made representation that we didn't want the area to just drop off and become a vandalised area. We wanted it to be tidied up completely. We didn't.
Yeah, no, what I meant was, are they a true record of the meeting?
Yes, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Pardon? You can second them. Yeah, and I will second them, so I'll sign both of those. Thank you. So if we've had a slight change to the published agenda, and we're now going to take as our first item the Strategic Equality Plan, and we have the officer Alan Burkett is with us today, and I think if it would be really helpful if you could just start off by just telling us a little bit about your role, and obviously the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alan Burkett. I deal with equalities and Welsh language in the authority. So basically looking after policy, ensuring that we're compliant with both pieces of legislation, so the Equality Act of 2010 and the Welsh Language Measure of 2011. So the Equality Act has been around since 2010, and we've done a lot of good work on that particular aspect. The Welsh Language Measure came in 2011, but we did a lot of preparatory work over the last probably about 3 years, I think, with that, because it introduces the principles of standards, of which we as a council have to comply with 176, which is an arduous task because it goes across the whole of the authority. It's basically about treating the Welsh language on equality, with equality in terms of the English language, and for us to promote the Welsh language as well in our sort of day-to-day operation. So there we are, in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. And are you're going to also present the policy to us, are you, or are you going to highlight certain aspects of it?
Yeah, I'll just run through, if you want to, what it includes and our sort of responsibility. So the Act of 2010 required that we have a strategic equality plan done in consultation with the public and with officers. That was done back in about 2012. It ran then for 4 years, and one of the requirements is that you've got to have an act, so you have a set of objectives agreed by council. Then there's an action plan, obviously, to try and achieve those actions. So I think this now is the 6th report. We've done 4. We did 4 on the first strategic equality plan. A new equality plan was written then in 2016 and will be in place until 2020. And this is the 2nd strategic equality plan annual monitoring report. And basically it's going through, so this particular document is fairly hefty document, nearly 50 pages. A lot of it is common to all the others. But I think from my perspective, the key ones, there's a lot of information there regarding what we have to do in terms of the Act 2010. So there's general duty, there's specific duties. As authority, I think we do a lot of work towards these particular areas. We've got then on page, I think it's page 7, we've got our objectives, which are fairly generic. So things like doing the basics, what we have to do under the Equality Act, educating and guiding, so offering training. I think we've got 2 sessions of training coming up now fairly shortly for the new members. Celebrating and commemorating, that's for us not to forget things that have happened in the past and perhaps groups of protected characteristics or people with protected characteristics that in the past have had issues, and there are days to commemorate and celebrate those. Making a difference, so where we work in partnership on projects, and keeping a focus. So keeping a focus on the more vulnerable people that we provide services to. A lot of it's about engagement. Work very closely with communications team with Rhian Cook. They do a fantastic job in terms of getting the message across. And I think the key one, I mean, we're looking to revise this current. Sorry, probably the key thing to say is this one. You may be looking at some of these actions and saying these happened a long time ago. The strange thing is with these annual monitoring reports is they report a year behind. So this one looks at 2016, 2017. So we're basically going back to last March. So it shows what's happened. So I basically every year go to my contacts within the department and say, hey guys, what's happened in terms of equalities? And I think the remarkable thing is that some of these things happen. I don't think they know they're equalities, but they link in with the protected characteristics. So a lot of the information towards the sort of middle and the end of the report are packed with what's happened and what our officers have done in terms of working with and helping people with protected characteristics. The timing of these reports, I think, is always really, not the reports, but the acts are really strange. We had to get a new strategic equality plan in by 2016. Yet we were doing a massive piece of work on the well-being strategy. So what we decided to do was try and gather information from the well-being assessment. And also there's a very good document from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, who look after the Equality Act in Wales, called Is Wales Fairer? And we've pulled out the information from there, and we're looking to do a refresh of the strategic equality plan in the next, be it 6-12 months, using that information. Probably that gives us more evidence than we had from our consultations prior to that. So it just makes sense. There's a lot of issues that have cropped up from the wellbeing assessment that are issues within, obviously, in Monmouthshire that have been highlighted by the public. I think it's only fair then that we look to try and address those. Some of them would be addressed by the PSB and the committee or the committee structure or the meeting structure beneath that. I think we're looking to pick up the ones that sort of slip the net, perhaps that aren't being dealt with, and that we feel as an authority, through our inclusion group, which used to be called the Monmouthshire Equality and Diversity Group, we'll be looking to try and pick those up. I'm looking to refresh that group as well, because the membership's dropped off a bit. I think it needs a new focus and a new focus to try and work on some of these issues. So really, apart from anything within the report that you want to ask questions on, there's a lot of information there with stats as well. Obviously, that's a year back as well. And there's work being done on the gender pay gap, I think, which is quite successful. I think we've gone from something like 18th out of 22. We're near the top now, apparently, about third, I think, in Wales in terms of that gap has closed, which is fantastic news. We can't be complacent, obviously, because those sort of things can obviously slip. But I'm open to any questions then on any individual things within this.
Thank you very much, Alan. And I think, the report certainly is very clear, and this is such an important work that you and your team do, and it is all encompassing. It affects us in every meeting we attend and everything that we do, also in our wards. So if we could take questions now, please, members, for Alan. Councillor Roden and then Councillor Webb.
Thank you for the presentation, Alan. It's really interesting and important. You mentioned training for members. As a new member, I feel as my knowledge base in this area is not that significant. I wonder, can you provide an outline of content for future training programs for us? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I've got an ex-colleague of mine I'm going to bring in to do this training. I think there's a session coming up now in April, and there's a session then in May. Trying to keep them fairly close together. Hopefully then we can cover most elected members. I think it's really key that we look at. I know within the discussions on the financial savings proposals that there were issues in terms of equality impact assessments being weak. I think we're looking really to refresh people on what equality is, so the basic principles of what we should be looking for, but also the fact that we've got to be robust in terms of these equality impact assessments, because if we're challenged on any issue that comes up as a council, it's not just financial savings proposals, but a proposal, for example, it could be to close toilets somewhere. You've got to be robust in that you've consulted with the local people, you've got the data which will back your proposal. A consultation is obviously key, that you're giving people the opportunity to have their say. And you've really got to try and back that up with strong evidence. So, and I think it's fair to say that our EQAs, although probably better than some local authorities, are probably not what I would, and perhaps elected members would regard as, being of sufficient quality to allow you to make or to ask questions. It's got to be that you've got the information that you can make an informed decision. I think that's a lot of the challenges in the past that have been successful against local authorities are on the basis that elected members who make the decisions haven't got the information in front of them that they can make an informed decision. I think that's really important. So if it gives you the awareness and the training to ask these difficult questions when officers are presenting with challenging scenarios, then I think that's the really important thing. So there'll be a mix. So it'll be give me that information that you can think about areas where you're going to ask questions, but also the general principles of why, what is equalities, who does it belong to, what are the protected characteristics. So I think it should be quite useful.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Roden?
Thank you, Alan. I look forward to the training courses, and it's an interesting framework to operate in the future for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Alan. Do you have any meetings with colleagues in other councils, and how are they progressing with this? I mean, do you get together and have... I'd be interested to know that. And another thing, have you been to any area committees to also to point this out to community and town councils and to probably members of the public that might attend and make them more aware of the work that you're doing, please?
Right, first question, yeah, we do meet. We used to meet, actually, it was arranged by the WLGA. So we used to meet on a quarterly basis across Wales. So we say you meet in the centre of Wales, which is not Llandrindod, but we meet at Llandrindod. And you basically pick up on good practice, bad practice, and anything new that was coming in. So it was led by the Welsh Local Government Association. Unfortunately, the rug was pulled from underneath that particular group within WLGA. So we've been a bit, we've used our sort of local contacts, and we tend to meet as a couple of groups in the southeast of the county. We meet also with Cardiff and so on. And that's just really good, because there's only myself that deals with qualities of Welsh language within it. So this is the team. It's a team of one. And some of the authorities are fortunate to have more than one, but quite often there's not a big gang of you dealing with this sort of work, and it can get quite challenging at times with some of the questions we get asked. It's key, because you learn about particular issues that crop up in other authorities. I tend to get emails saying, "Hi guys, we had this issue crop up. How would you deal with it?" And I tend to do the same as well. If it's something that you haven't dealt with before, you need to. There's no one that can really ask in the authority for advice on that if it's an equalities issue. So we tend to use our group then to deal with those. And I think it's very important, I think, to have that backup. In terms of area committees, no, I haven't, to be honest, but it's something I would be happy to do if it was felt to be useful.
Can you make a note then that perhaps you could come to the next Lower Y area committee, which is on the 26th of April? I'm really looking for items for the agenda, because sometimes these are a bit, people say, well, why are we here? And if you were there, I'm sure it would make it more interesting for people to attend. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry about the liaison between the other councils, but I'm sure I'm just wondering, do you have a more difficult job in Monmouthshire than people say in Carmarthenshire or something like that? Is your job more challenging, is the word, I suppose?
Well, I think in terms of equalities, I mean, it's probably not so diverse as other authorities. I mean, if you go into Newport and Cardiff, it's massively diverse. And my wife's a social worker. She works in Monmouth. She says, well, we don't get many issues in Monmouthshire, but when we do get issues, they're big issues, because they're not the norm. So something that happens in Newport, which may be the norm, for us isn't the norm. So perhaps we struggle to deal with them more so. In terms of Welsh language, this is a challenging area. In Carmarthenshire, it's obviously, you hear Welsh spoken on the streets. Here it's more sort of under the surface. So the challenge always is to say to people, actually, it is alive in Monmouthshire. There are people here that speak it, and there's people that, there's thousands that have learnt it. And also we've got people who've moved from West Wales or Welsh speakers into this area. I know many of them. So the dynamic has changed over the years. It's almost as if people are it's almost like the whole of Wales has sort of changed around a bit. So, it's challenging, but it's a massively interesting job, because no 2 days are the same.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Webber. You happy? Okay. Are there any other questions from members? I'm delighted that our portfolio holder, Councillor Sarah Jones, is able to join us today. And I wondered whether you wanted to make any comments on this particular item at all, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Not really, just to thank Alan for all the hard work that he puts into this agenda, which is absolutely critical to everything that we're doing, particularly with the social justice strategy piece coming up later. I suppose just a couple of points, and Alan's mentioned this, the inclusion group is something we're looking to refresh and get that absolutely right now, with the right membership, the right terms of reference, because I think that's got a really important role. Also this refresh of the plan itself, so looking to do something around that, which would be interesting and would welcome members' feedback. I think Councillor Webb's point around area committees is a really good one, and I think that would be great to put that on the agenda at the various area committees, because it's really important that our communities are aware of the work that we're doing, and also for them to feed into this piece. And great news that the training's taking place as well, because again we want to bolster those equality impact assessments and the ability for members to be able to scrutinise and challenge based on those. So just to welcome the plan and thank Alan for the work on it as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And if I can thank you for the report, Alan, and for coming along today. And obviously, we very much look forward to the training. And it sounds as if it's going to be really interesting. And I think with this training, it's something that needs to be ongoing, because, there's developments all the time. And it's something we need to keep on top of. You can't just have the training and then leave it for a few years. It needs to be on a regular basis. So thank you very much indeed. So we're now going to move on to our next item, which is going to be the item on violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. And is it my understanding that Sharon Lloyd, is she?
Yes.
Yeah. Are we just waiting for? Okay, we'll just wait a couple of minutes then for our next officer to arrive. Can I just take who would like to ask questions on this particular item first? Councillor Guppy? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Good morning, officers, and thank you very much for coming along today, especially, very grateful thanks to Sharon, who has come in today off her annual leave to speak at our meeting. We really appreciate that. So if you could just begin by introducing yourselves to the members and also to those listening on the web.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. I'm Sharon Lloyd. I manage the Communities and Partnerships Development team on behalf of Monmouthshire Council. The Public Services Board sits within that remit, and therefore the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence agenda also sits there with an arm into safeguarding as well within the authority.
I'm Helen Gordon. I'm one of the regional officers for the Gwent Vowdress V team, and I have a special lead within the National Training Framework, in particular within our team as well.
Hi, I'm Janice Dent. I'm an officer as well, so I'm here with Helen today.
Thank you very much. And you're going to lead on this, Sharon, are you? So if you'd like to present.
Thank you, Chair. The report that I've sent through, really, it's a report that is actually currently going around all of our partners across Gwent for approval and commitment towards the agenda that we're taking forward. What you probably are aware of, or may be aware of, is that in 2015 we had a new piece of legislation in Wales, which was the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Act. And that act placed a duty on local authorities and health boards in particular to work in partnership to be able to address the issues around domestic abuse and sexual violence. So Welsh Government also had what they called was a Pathfinder pilot area, and Gwent was identified as that Pathfinder area. And as a result of that, it gave us an opportunity really to look at strategic coordination of the Vowdress V agenda across Gwent and to work in partnership with our Gwent partners to look at how we can provide services and consistency and take the Act and all of the legislation forward in a way that doesn't disadvantage the people who are suffering or experiencing domestic abuse, sexual violence and other issues within that arena. So it meant that it was no longer going to be a postcode lottery. It would provide consistency across the county and ensure that we were all meeting the terms and conditions of the legislation that's been placed on us as public bodies. As part of that as well, it's also played on the strengths that Gwent has as a region of working in strong partnership and collaborating with our Gwent partners, because we're quite familiar and we do that quite readily across the region. It was a very strong area really to have as a pilot region, and that then has helped Welsh Government to inform the national guidance. So we are kind of leading the way in Gwent in terms of the other duties. The duties obviously apply to all of the bodies across Wales, but Gwent, I would say, is probably at the forefront of driving this and informing Welsh Government of how we can roll this out consistently across the area. So We have developed a plan. There has been a regional board put in place, which, as the report talks to, is made up of a lot of our Gwent partners, the Police and Crime Commissioner, health boards. We also have national services like the Welsh Ambulance Service and our probation services on the board. It also leads with our RSLs and the supporting people partners. We have South Wales Fire and Rescue, and we also have our third sector organisations who are also represented on the board and supportive of the agenda as well. So as part of that, the board have developed a regional strategy which is based around the priorities within the national strategy for Wales that's come out as a result of the legislation. And we've listed in the report today some of the strategic aims of that strategy and what the strategy aims to do, but also how that aligns to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and how we're trying to make sure that what we're delivering is in the spirit of that also across the region. So what we've come here today really is to present that strategy to you. It has been out for a lengthy consultation, but it's coming through the processes now where we want to refine this and ensure that all partners are content that the strategy is meeting the aims of what we want to achieve against this agenda, but also to make sure that partners are secure in how we intend to drive this agenda forward across Wales. And we would absolutely welcome any comments today or any questions from you in relation to that.
Thank you very much indeed. And in our pre-meeting, we were just discussing the title subject, because whilst it says against women, obviously it's against anybody regardless of their sexual orientation, their gender or their ethnicity. So we're going to take questions now, and if I can ask Councillor Guppy first of all, and then Councillor Webb. Thank you.
Thank you for this comprehensive report. Just to say, on the report that I've got today, some of the links open and some don't, so I'm not quite sure. And in particular, I read the report and I was sort of looking at it as a bystander reading it, and I've got it does say a directory in one of the links, but that's not opening up here. But I think that there should be more information. You've got names of places and things, but what does it mean when there's like a project? What does it mean where it is? It's not generic enough. It might be that you know that place if you live there, but if you live in Greater Gwent, it's just a word on the paper, and not once in this, other than some of the links which I can't open. There's not the helpline on this at all, or some major contact telephone numbers, and maybe that should be at the front of the report, so as people got that, because we're talking about prevention, and you don't want to be going through here. I know it goes down to locally, and I know this is strategic, but there's a common number that's throughout the country, not just Wales, and maybe if there's local numbers as well that are put in. That's just my comment. It's not a criticism, but I just think it could raise it to sort of back down to basics. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guppy. And if you'd like to respond, and as well as telephone numbers, I'd be interested to know how people can touch base with these organisations on social media. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say that on that, in terms of contact numbers, yes, take the point of the helpline, that is a key point. But in terms of the link that wouldn't open of the directory, that directory, when you can see it, is broken down by locality. So all of Monmouthshire's local services are listed under a specific element of Monmouthshire. So we'll look into why that link's not working, because that is a huge key document for us across Gwent in terms of services, exactly what they provide, who they're for, where they're located, contact numbers and times you can contact them. So we need to kind of check on that one as well.
Just check. I've got something like the ACES document open, but I can't. I don't think it's my computer. I tried opening them myself. Thanks.
So you're able to open the link, are you, Councillor Easton? Okay, well, obviously we'll check on that. Did you? Was there anything else on this particular point that Councillor Guppy's raised?
Just to add, I think it was talked about in the strategy, but there will also be, under the regional Vowdor SV board, there is a strategic delivery group as well that mirrors the partners, and that group is actually working on the action plan that will support the delivery of the strategy, and ideally we probably like to bring that back here as well for you to have a look at that once that's finalised as well, for further comments and refinement, really, to ensure that you're happy that we're covering all elements in terms of that delivery against the strategy.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, sort of with the delivery, it's going to come back to this committee?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine to come back to this committee, and we'd welcome if that's an opportunity you'd like to have, then we'd more than be willing to bring it back here for your consideration going forward.
Yeah. Or maybe an interim report in view of responses on the key headings, protection, what is happening, phone calls to the police, are they being followed up, are they being reported? Because it's no good if you just get a phone call to the police and then other services out there that are supporting and not getting that. And I know we've got the DAC system, but is that working fully? Because I know in the last couple of years the change of that format has happened, but is it as efficient as it used to be when there's more multi-agencies responding to those DAC calls? And what's the implications of higher calls are reported, but the lower calls, are we keeping a track on that? Sort of maybe the interim reports can be presented at this so that we know it is happening or where the faults are. Thank you.
I think, can I just say one thing? Just to say Safe Lives are doing a review of the DAC and the MARAC at the moment. So hopefully when we do the interim report, we'll have a lot more rich information to bring as well with that.
Yeah, and just conscious that DAC and MARAC, I know we use these terms quite frequently, but if you're not familiar with them, the DAC is the Domestic Abuse Conference Call, and it used to be a call, but we've recently moved it to a SharePoint system. And the MARAC is the multi-agency risk assessment conference, and that usually deals with those victims at risk of death or serious harm. So, and both of those, as we say, are undergoing a review, and we can bring that report back as well to inform members.
Thank you. Thank you for those points, Councillor Guppy. Are you happy with that response? Councillor Webb?
Really comprehensive. Thank you ever so much for all the work that you've done in this connection. I'm just looking at the title, Gwent Regional Violence Against Women. Could that just be Gwent Regional Violence, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence? Can we delete? I'm not sure. This is just off the top of my head now. And another thing, I know our MPs and AMs have a lot of paperwork to deal with, but have they had a copy of this report, please? Because I'm sure that they come into contact with a lot of these problems.
Just on the title, it mirrors the legislation.
Okay, I thought
so
probably it did.
Yeah, so it does mirror the legislation. I think it's really important to bear in mind that when we read this title, instead of reading it as kind of violence against women, including domestic abuse, sexual violence, there's separate elements. So violence against women being very much, I know we mentioned it at the beginning as well, very much around violence that is specifically perpetrated against women because they are women. That is one issue that is key. But then domestic abuse, sexual violence being encompassing of all people, all genders and everything else. So, and in terms of this going into Welsh Government and into the AMs, then yes, it will do. Once my understanding is that once it's gone through this part of scrutiny and it's been adapted and finally signed off by the partnership.
And MP.
Pardon? And the MP. I'm sure that we can make sure it's circulated as wide as possible. It'll be published anyway, it'll be in the public domain as well. So.
Did you want to come back at all, Councillor Webb? Or are there any other questions from members? Councillor Easton and then Councillor Roden.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Domestic abuse and violence has got roots in has got causes in many roots. And a lot of it is financial, or most of it is financial, in the family, tensions and not what. Are you expecting to find an increase in, hopefully not, but an increase in domestic violence or family troubles with the rollout of the universal credit, which is due across Wales and Monmouthshire in the next number of months?
Yeah, unfortunately so. We are expecting an increase with the universal credit. Not proven yet, obviously, because it hasn't happened. But with one person receiving the money, that might well have an impact on family kind of situations, etc. Unfortunately, we're already seeing a rise in familial domestic abuse. So that's already happening. Predominantly financial again, where kind of, siblings and children are financially abusing their parents. So we're already seeing that rise.
What do you believe we can do as a society to prevent that or stop it from recurring greater, whatever?
I think it comes, I know this is a trite answer, but it does come back to the strategy priorities. So it is about raising awareness, it is about looking at prevention, it's about early intervention, it's about holding perpetrators to account as well. So actually, because it's a family issue, sometimes that's not challenged as much as it could be, because you've got love and you've got all of those kind of other elements to it. So it's about, as a society, us understanding this, and that's not acceptable, that actually we need to be doing something about it to prevent it.
Just to add another bit onto that as well, there is a national training framework which is attached to the legislation, and hopefully that is going to be, well, I say hopefully, it is being rolled out currently across all of the partners across Gwent. It's being rolled out within our own local authority here within Monmouthshire. It's been driven very much by the leader, Peter Fox, at the moment. It is a duty that is placed upon us as a public body, that we have to undertake minimum levels of those different levels of training within that framework currently. But the idea is that the different levels of training are pushed out at the appropriate level, but to be able to assist us, and not just as officers, but as family members, as parents, as friends and colleagues of other people, to be able to spot the signs and symptoms of domestic abuse and to be able to take action or to try and support a person or to seek further advice around how we can help mitigate what we think or suspect might be going on within a particular environment. So I think the legislation and the introduction of that training framework is a really good start at being able to raise everybody's awareness of this issue, because it is going, as we say, we do suspect that some of these things, as we start to get more intelligence gathering around them, we will see a peak in that, in the data and in the numbers. But if we can start to mitigate it at an earlier point, then that will hopefully support those people who might be suffering from any of the domestic abuse or sexual violence across the county.
Are you happy with that response, Councillor Easton? Councillor Roden? Yeah. Councillor Roden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the general incidence of issues that are reported in the county and where the reports are kept of the incidences, so that we can actually look into it, changes in numbers, that sort of thing. Thank you.
So we collect information from Gwent Police around it. So we've got information on rape report, no crime. I'm not quite sure. We need to dig into that. And then other sexual offences. So the aim is that we keep an eye on those benchmark figures and how they raise and drop. And as Sharon was saying, sometimes when you start monitoring, you see a peak. And then hopefully our interventions will mean that they go back down again then. But it's something that we're working on a data frame with a partnership board, working on a data framework as well, so that we can give much more rich information on a regular basis.
That was rape. What about domestic abuse? Is there a database of information on that? And can we actually look into the incidence of things so we can keep an eye on what's going on in the county?
Again, that's collected by Gwent Police, so any reports of domestic abuse, and we get those on a 6 monthly basis. You don't always have the follow-up information though, so you get the statistics, and then it's up to us with the delivery plan and with the partnership board data work to make sure that we're digging into that and trying to understand it a bit more.
Thank you, Councillor Roden. any other questions from members? Can I just ask if Councillor Sarah Jones did want to ask any or sum up at all in any way?
Yeah, and there's lots that I've still got to learn. I think it's great that Gwent's been an early adopter in many of the areas under the new legislation, and there's lots to do. So it's important we're taking the strategic approach Gwent-wide, but I'm really keen to ensure that Monmouthshire has a really strong voice on that group, because one of the challenges I think we face as a county is the issue of underreporting, and again that goes back to awareness raising, so the importance of bolstering awareness raising throughout the county using our communication mechanisms to do that. So I'll be really interested in that approach. I mean, just looking back, I was a domestic abuse champion back in the previous council, and in my own ward there, I think there was only 4 reported incidents across a ward of 1,800 people, and I think it's fair to say that there's a definite degree of underreporting going on. I think that's a real challenge for particularly a rural authority like ours, so it's key we have a strong voice as part of this Gwent-wide approach that's being taken, and from my perspective as well, I suppose it's the action plan that's going to be really critical in terms of how we deliver against these strategic objectives, which I think are very much what we'd all support. So yeah, look forward to seeing that, and I'm really keen as well that we come back to this committee, or the group comes back to this committee, because again it's part of that awareness raising through the scrutiny approach. So thank you.
Thank you. If I can just ask one question myself, I'm particularly concerned about on page 9, it says about adverse childhood experiences, and I would just like to have some information. I've got a colleague, a councillor in Newport, who introduced a strategy in the southwest of England where when a child has had a horrendous, experience, that the school is notified the next day, so that if they're going into school, they get the support. And we have to remember that these issues go across all social classes. They affect every class. So what actually happens as far as the school is concerned, where a child is going into school and has been, subject to a horrendous experience?
Yeah, so a large part of that will come down to the safeguarding that exists within the schools, of which education and education safeguarding needs massively would form part of the national training framework, for example. And so in terms of awareness raising and spotting those signs within children, that would become part of that, but it's also standard part of their safeguarding processes and protocol. And I know that safeguarding need within Monmouthshire is actually a trained trainer for the Ask and Act, and so has a really keen handle on this. So in terms of the detail of what actually the processes are that exist within Monmouthshire, within the education system, I'm not aware of the exact processes that would trigger for safeguarding. That would probably be a question that safeguarding would need to answer more specifically.
Thank you. I'm just interested to know whether or not the police, if they attend an incident, that they find out if there's children there, which school they go to, and that they would alert the school to the problem. So that is something that I'm just interested to know whether that happens here.
Yeah. Obviously, sorry, I'm Claire Marchant, Chief Officer for Social Care and Health, so just picking up the interrelationship between domestic abuse and safeguarding processes. Obviously, if children are involved in a situation where domestic abuse is within the household, that in itself is something which comes in and is worked with in a multi-agency way through our child protection, our care and support arrangements. So all partners would be around the table in those scenarios, so the police, social services, school, and as has already been said, that the role of the lead officers for safeguarding in each of our schools, and each school has a designated lead, would be key in those arrangements, and the support around the children in that environment. There is a very strong interrelationship between the sorts of situations we deal with from a protection perspective and domestic abuse, and often we'll be working through more than one process in terms of making sure that we're protecting the children as well as supporting the victims of domestic abuse. So those relationships are there, the training. I think we're at very high levels. I don't know the exact percentage, but in terms of our schools having had the necessary training and awareness raising, and just a plea to all members. I know there's not that many here today, but all members in terms of their training and awareness raising as part of the sort of rollout of Voucher SV. You know, it's critically important that everybody understands the signs to look out for and knows what to do critically if they do see those signs, and how to have the conversations.
Thank you very much, Claire. So could you confirm with me then that if there was an incident, then the school would be notified the next day that would actually happen?
Well, the schools would be part of our safeguarding arrangement, so it's not necessarily a direct notification from the police to the schools, but the police would have a duty to report in terms of safeguarding if they had any concerns around the children, and then that in itself instigates a multi-agency approach, which includes the schools.
Thank you. I was interested because this colleague of mine did introduce this in the Southwest, and it is happening down there, and I just wondered whether there was a commitment to it here. But thank you for answering that. So unless there's any other questions, then I would just like to thank the team for coming along to present this very important item to us today. And obviously it's something that we look forward to further updates in the future. So thank you very much indeed. Yeah. Claire, would you like to come down to present the next item? Thank you very much. So we now are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the social justice policy. We were fortunate to have an excellent seminar this week, which I know some of us were able to get to, and that was very well attended. I think there were at least 3/4 of members at that seminar, so it was an extremely valuable discussion. But if I could ask Claire to introduce herself and present the next item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Claire Marchant, Chief Officer for Social Care and Health. And as you've said, Chair, there was a seminar earlier this week, which I'm not sure if all members of this select committee were there, but it was a 2-hour really in-depth discussion around the social justice strategy. And we really tried to focus in that seminar on testing out with members whether the priorities within the strategy felt right to them from their experience of as being ward members and understanding of the issues both within their own wards and across Monmouthshire generally, and to work through whether there was anything which was in that strategy which didn't need to be there, or conversely whether there were other areas which we needed to prioritise that weren't currently featuring as strongly as they needed to within the strategy. We also asked members particularly to focus and to give us insight in terms of how we measure the impact of the strategy, and I'm sure that will be a key sort of area of interest for you as a select committee. You know, how are you going to monitor and track that impact over time? And we sort of also talked to members about their own roles as community leaders, and how you as members can take a real role working with us across the council, with partners, particularly with our community partnership and development team, who are the engine room really in terms of delivery of this strategy on the ground, to make sure we understand what the real issues are, what the strengths are, and what the challenges are within the individual communities across Monmouthshire. So there was some very valuable feedback through that seminar, I think particularly around the importance of housing, and how, given it's one of the critical issues that we face within as a council, around people living the lives that they want to live and having the right sort of means and access to affordable housing to enable them to do that. What policy interventions are really available to us as a council that we can build into this social justice strategy, but also through the lens of social justice, sort of inform other pieces of work, critically the local development plan, which is out to consultation at the moment, to make sure that we're really addressing those inequalities in terms of access to affordable housing within our communities. And I think there was also quite a strong sort of discussion around the measures and what are the effective measures in understanding the impact that this strategy is having, and how we sort of very meaningfully make sure that social justice is at the heart of all sort of policy processes, budget setting and other activities that we take forward as a council. And for that reason, I think there's probably a very strong interconnection between this strategy and the earlier agenda item around sort of qualities and how we properly understand the impact on some of our most vulnerable groups and vulnerable parts of the population. So we are in the process of taking that feedback, not just from that seminar, but engaging through our partnerships, through our PSB partners, through area committees around this strategy, to make sure that when it comes through to its final iteration and taking it into cabinet, that it's as inclusive as it can be of as wide a range of views as possible. But also bearing in mind that it's about some priorities we can actually deliver on, rather than setting out everything and not delivering on any of them. It's about making sure that we set out some things we're actually going to do. I wasn't proposing to take you through the detail of the strategy, bearing in mind that people will have had that presentation and also the opportunity to read it. But you can see the key areas that are within there around children and young people and giving children the best possible start in life, around economic prosperity, and around loneliness and social isolation, which is particularly an issue which impacts on many of our older population, but can be an issue at any stage within the life course. We, in terms of the sort of supporting actions and measures which support delivery of those priorities, there will be a number of supporting plans which come through. We are developing a particular plan around poverty through one of the partnership groups that sits beneath the Public Service Board, and there's also a plan coming forward which is again being developed in partnership around loneliness and isolation. But there's also a lot of action on the ground currently, which is very engaged in delivering against this strategy. And I know that you had the Community Development and Partnership team have been to Select Committee, and sort of really able to talk, in real terms about how they're working with communities, understanding the assets that and strengths that communities have, but also understanding the very real issues that communities face, and looking to work with communities to put in place responses to those issues through developing community leaders and supporting community leaders, the ongoing strength and going from strength to strength of our volunteering programme, working through existing and developing new partnerships where groups on the ground and individuals, as well as some of the bigger organisations, come together in local spaces to address what those issues are. So I think it's the policy, the detailed plans that sit beneath the measures, and then the action, joining up all of those things, and making sure, as the strategy sets out, really, that social justice and addressing those deep-seated inequalities are really at the heart of everything we do. I think one of the other issues which came across very strongly is sort of those two sides, really, that a lot of the inequalities we face are deep-seated, intergenerational, and require strategic action across a range of partnerships over a long period of time. There are also a lot of the measures are related to mitigating action, so to mitigate the impact on people, families and communities of some of the challenges that they face. And so there's a balance between, can we address the root causes of what's causing particular sort of problems within our communities and then mitigating as far as is possible those actions. So that's probably all I want to say in terms of introduction, but very happy to take questions, which will obviously then inform the final strategy as it goes forward into Cabinet, which at the moment is scheduled for the 2nd of May.
Thank you very much, Claire. And I know that I found the seminar extremely helpful, but I have had the opportunity since then, like we all have, to really sort of think about it. And we may have some further questions following the seminar. So I know that Councillor Roden had some questions that he wanted to ask around certain aspects. So I'll take that question first.
Thank you, Chair. It was a fairly straightforward question, Claire. I just noticed that the wage statistics in the case for change at the start date back to 2014, 2015. I wondered if it would be possible for these to be updated so we can get some idea of changes that are taking place.
Certainly what we will do in terms of the measures and the impact is to make sure that as new data comes through, that we're keeping that we're updating as and when new data sets come through. Obviously, you know, it's dependent on some of the data reporting cycles coming through, but where new data comes through, I think it's really important that it's the most up-to-date information that's reflected.
Thank you. Did you want to come back at all, or is... Okay.
As long as it's being updated, I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guppy.
Yes, I was just sort of wondering about the financial implications of this policy, really, and who's going to take charge of the different areas. I'm just looking about like child-friendly communities. Well, over the last couple of years, if play equipment has become dangerous or old and need to be removed, they're not put back into the communities, that they're taken away and left for forever as space. And you know, we want children to get out, we feel safe, we want activities, an active community. But what's going to happen, that's sort of just one example. How are we going to finance that? And obviously it wasn't a priority, taking play equipment away, but it is a priority in that within all communities. And we're also, you know, we all quite often see press releases celebrating new play equipment, skateboard parks that are being placed in the communities. But as a county, when things get old, they're not being replaced automatically. And I think maybe, you know, we really need to stick to the basics, and prioritise what is in there, because play areas for children within this county are difficult because they've got transport issues. You know, there's financial issues if you have to go to another town, another community to access outdoor play. And we know what the benefits of that, you know, going out and getting out about, health, well-being, you know, community, you know, stops isolation, you know, education, you know, we can go on and on and on. But, you know, how are we going to address these kind of problems financially?
Really interesting point, and there's probably a very general point about sort of financial resourcing of the strategy and sort of the impact of and some very specific things around play. If I try and take them in sort of both aspects, really, we know we are operating, don't we? We've just been through a budget round in incredibly financially challenged times as a council, and through public service partners in that position. I think the challenge to us is around that, is a looking at the resources that we have. Are we using all of those resources to best effect, both as a council and through partnerships? Because there is money through, be it through specific grants. One of the commitments in here is to look at the specific grants that we have to ensure they're prioritised, not duplicating, that we're making the sort of maximum impact of every penny that we have. So to give you a little of a practical example of that, we've got Families First, we've got Fly and Start, we've got Supporting People, we've got grants around economic inclusion. We've got integrated care fund. All of them are sort of doing things which are sort of slightly interrelated to each other, but have we taken a really strategic approach and made sure we absolutely have set priorities and that we are maximising how those grants work together to deliver the impact. So some parts of Wales are already pilots for looking at some of those grants together. And, we are certainly looking strategically at how we might align the investment through those grants to maximise impact. We also need to work with partners around the resources that are available to them. One of the sort of areas that we're sort of working through in terms of our engagement around this strategy is through our PSP programme board to hopefully get partners to a position where they endorse this strategy. And then when we're in a position where we can look at the totality of resources which are invested in communities and able to really, I think the test of the maturity and the impact of public service boards is that we're aligning some of those community investments in a far more of a joined up way around what those priorities are. I think if we come on to the specific around play, we do have a partnership group which is a part of our public service arrangements called Active Monmouthshire. I might not have the name exactly right, and one of the key areas of work and subgroups there is around play. And at the seminar the other day, one of my colleagues, Jude Langdon, was here and was talking about that work and talking not just about traditional solutions in terms of play, but talking about some of the work that she's been involved with where streets are being sort of closed for periods of time. People probably are aware of some of the examples just across the border in Bristol where that's happened, to create a safe play environment for children, families talking to each other who hadn't talked to each other, and providing networks, but really sort of innovative solutions to some of the challenges that communities are facing where they don't have sort of play in that more traditional sense in a park which everybody goes to, but using the resources and facilities within that communities around innovative solutions which are having lots and lots of knock-on benefits. So I think that it is a priority through that group. There are some really good examples of things which are being done, and it's about working with communities, which is the community development approach, to really understand the issues in each community and what solutions might be available to it, whilst trying to join up at every level resources so that they maximise the impact.
Thank you, Claire. Did you want to come back?
Yes, no, I understand that, looking at play as a heading, there's lots been done in this community, in county rather, but it's about the infrastructure that's been taken away from the communities. Some people might not want to join up, and it's about looking at valuing our open spaces. And I don't think, it says child-friendly communities. We're taking away valuable equipment because there's a cost on it, and I think it, with all these play activities, we've got the summer schemes and things like that. All these cost thousands and thousands of pounds. Some of the play equipment to get replaced cost thousands of pounds, but the value of it for the community, getting up and going and accessing 7 days a week, 24 hours a day really. But some of the play schemes and things with the strategy that you can't do that 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. And I think we need to be starting to look at it, in more detail. There's been talk about it, looking at what services we have got in our county, but nothing's been done about it at the moment. It's not progressed. So I'd like to look at what we've got and not what we're going to do at the moment. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not an expert in play, and I'm sure you appreciate that, but I do know there is a partnership group which is looking at this, and I can describe some of the sorts of things that they're doing. So I think the importance probably for you as a select committee is to think about getting that, or one of the other select committees, because I've seen play sufficiency reports going to children and young people in the past, is to get asked that partnership. What are the details of the plans? How are we going to measure the impact of what's coming through? Because I'm hearing lots of examples of where there is a lot going on. I perhaps am not as aware as you are of things that are being taken away, but there is a partnership group which is delivering on that. And each one of the areas where we're identifying priorities will have specifics where we'll measure how we're delivering against all of those priorities. And every sort of policy proposal, strategy plan that comes forward, we're looking to ensure that the social justice impact is properly understood.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for all the work you've done on this. It's really important. I'm from the seminar the other day, and I'm really pleased to see that this is going to be a live document and that there's going to be a committee formed cross-party, and I really think that'll be very interesting. There's some really brilliant wording here. By working together around a place, this strategy can provide the context to ensure that we all achieve so much more than individual partners and community groups working in isolation. Bringing together support networks, aligning resources and assets, funding, development opportunities and people with a common sense of purpose will really help to build sustainable and resilient communities. By working collaboratively with the people who live and work locally, we will seek to highlight the strengths, capacity and knowledge of those involved for the greater good. Really brilliant wording there, and there's a lot of work to do regarding that, I think. One other thing, with regarding what Linda has said, I'm very struck. These are community assets, these play areas, and I really think the town and community councils should be fully involved in getting the funding and working. I mean, this is what we want to do. We want to engage more with community and town councils, and this is particularly work that they should be doing, to be honest with you. And I've said before, community and town councils aren't capped at the moment like we are, so therefore they can preset for the funding and get the work done. That's my end of my... Also, I see in the consultees, Claire, that the senior leadership team cabinet, stronger community select and all members, but there again we haven't mentioned town and community councils, and I'm just wondering if that's something that we could look at. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that partnership with town and community councils is really important. And when we're talking about, the assets within our communities, town and community councils are one of those assets within communities, and we need to work together with them, and everybody play their part, don't they? I will pick that up in terms of the specific consultees and make sure that they are part of the consultation and engagement process. And just to say, in a sense, the date, it's good that you've picked up that it's a live document, because that date of the 2nd of May in terms of cabinet consideration is really important, but it's not a static piece of work. So a lot of the engagement work will go on after all of that. We'll get to a point where hopefully cabinet will approve a strategy, but that's not the end point. The engagement and the involvement and the role of partners in delivery will continue thereafter. I think we just have to at some point get to the point where we've got a strategy approved.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Easton, before I bring our portfolio holder in, I would just like to make one point myself, which is obviously there's a very clear thread running through everything here, and it's been highlighted by Councillor Webb about us all, the communities all working together. And when I became chair of this committee, way back in the last year, I actually was very keen that we looked at modern day slavery and trafficking, and I think some people may have been a bit surprised that I was suggesting that, but since then, any of us that are on licensing, we've had 2 cases brought to licensing where there's been people brought into the country illegally working in difficult conditions, and also we've had reports of young women being groomed, or we suspect they were being groomed at takeaways. So I think we really need to work with the community. I mean, you may find that you're living somewhere and you wonder why that house next door has always got the curtains closed, and it's really quite incredible how the community can help in stamping out some of these terrible things that are actually going on. So I'm very keen that we look at this whole issue of modern day slavery and trafficking, and that within this, I think a lot of what we've discussed today is interlinked, sexual violence and also all these other topics we've looked at in detail today, and I'd be very keen that we do bring forward a report on this particular area of slavery and trafficking.
Yeah, very, very happy to do that. you know, I tend to sort of lead on those areas through the safeguarding lens. Certainly child sexual exploitation has been a huge priority in terms of our safeguarding endeavours and work over the last while, and we've been reporting on progress through that. And trafficking and slavery is, when we're looking at the strategic priorities for safeguarding for next year, is up there as you know, one that we need to do some more work in, set a strategy around and set some measures around. So very happy to bring those back. We're due to have some discussions at the next whole authority safeguarding around the detail of that, and then very happy to bring those back in.
Thank you. And we're very, very fortunate that we do have a portfolio holder for this, for social injustice. And I would like to invite Councillor Jones to really just sum up on this important item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, it's the second time this week I've been in the chamber, but it's great to have the opportunity again. And it's really important it goes through the scrutiny mechanism now. And so thank you for giving us the opportunity. I don't think I've got a huge amount to add to what we've already discussed either this week or what Claire said, you know, very articulately picked up on all the points. I mean, just to reflect myself on a couple of them, absolutely, this is a live document, so we'll update stats as and when to make sure that the case for change, you know, etc., is adequately reflected. And on the play facilities and that side of things, and I think just picking up on Councillor Webb's point as well, it's very much about community ownership. This document is around creating communities that are resilient and sustainable themselves, and working with town and community councils to enable them, and hence the creation of the Community Partnership Development Team. And just having gone out into local members' wards like Councillor Webb's ward, you know, I've seen some fantastic opportunities. There's a play area in Councillor Webb's ward which would be ideal for you know, the community to take ownership over and to work with the council on developing a fantastic play area for young people. I think, you know, just looking further about getting other members to endorse the strategy, so looking further ahead after the Cabinet approval of this isn't a live document, it's how we can work with our PSB partners to get them to endorse this strategy, because it's absolutely about a collaborative approach. There's no way we can deliver all this in isolation, so if we can get their endorsement, that would be great. And Councillor Pratt, on your point about trafficking and modern day slavery, really important point. And I think there's some work to do there with Alan Burkett around the equality side as well as with Dave Jones and his team in public protection. And just to mention, I'm meeting the EHRC, I think I mentioned on Tuesday, in the next couple of weeks. So it'd be something I'd be keen to discuss with them in terms of our approach to that. But yeah, thanks again for comments. I am typing away and making sure I reflect on them all before the paper goes forward, because the consultation side is absolutely key on this. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. So unless there's anything else anybody would like to add, I think I'd like to thank you for your input and questions into that very important item, which we were able to revisit today. Thank you very much, Claire. Have a lovely Easter.
Thank you, Angie.
So we now move on to our Forward Work programme. And if I could ask Hazel to talk us through that, please.
Yes, we've got a special meeting that we programmed for the 9th of April, which was to look at traffic and road safety and HGVs on country lanes. Unfortunately, we don't think that the work is actually ready as anticipated to bring to you. So the proposal really is to take that meeting out. As I say, it was a special meeting called specifically to look at 2 items. They're not ready. I propose that we take that meeting out of your calendar. Your next meeting is the 24th of May, but I think that's some time away. And given that members have said that there are some issues they'd like to sort of follow up on in the meantime, particularly the people services return, and we've got a request to bring you the highways management plan, which went to a recent workshop with members, and I think that was really well attended, and I've spoken to the chair, and we think that that's something that probably the committee would like to be brought forward to them before it's endorsed. So I would suggest that somewhere between now and the 24th of May that you hold a sort of special meeting, because I think there's too much really business wise to leave it until the 24th of May. So if you're happy with that, Paula and I can go away and have a look at some dates, and we'll get in touch with you, and obviously we'll avoid holidays and so forth. Is that okay?
Thank you very much for that, Hazel. And obviously, if we can also, the point about the slavery and trafficking as well, bringing that onto a...
Yes, I've spoken to Sharon, who you met for the first item, and one of Sharon's team members might be able to provide some sort of insight on this, but now we've flagged it up with Claire as well. It would be good, they report to Claire, but it would be good possibly to get a few different angles on this. So we'll look to bring that forward, an initial report to you sort of early summer, I think, because this has been on your sort of radar and it's something that you want to progress. And I'm quite sort of I can see that a lot of your work programme this year has been very much dictated by things that officers have needed to bring to you, when some of your own suggestions and things that you've sort of highlighted you'd like to look at have perhaps sort of sat a little bit on the back burner due to timing of issues. But this is certainly something that was highlighted during the work programme session last summer, and I think we need to sort of start addressing it before this summer.
Thank you. If I can take Councillor East and then Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add some more work to the forward work programme. It's to do with a matter which we discussed in the last council. It's to do with roadside advertising. We agreed it in principle in the last council. It was rolled out. There was a lot of concern by the members of the public. It was pulled back in. It's been rolled out again in the last 12 months or so. What I'd like to know, I'd like to report from Roger Hoggins on the feasibility of the report, of the implementation of it. We got a lot of these positions set up. It doesn't seem to be much of a take-up on it. So I'd like a report from Mr. Hoggins on the costs of implementing the scheme. What is pulling back in, and is it viable for the future? And should we look at another strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Easton. I think that's a very important, valuable point you've raised, and it could be possible that we could incorporate this with the highways. Yeah. So thank you for that, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a strong believer in getting out and seeing things, and I'm just wondering, with this highlighting about the plastic waste and everything at the moment, if Hazel could advise us if it would be perhaps an opportunity to go around our recycling depots again. I've been quite a few times, and it's fascinating, and I'm sure members that haven't been, perhaps Richard hasn't had that experience, it's really fascinating. I'm just wondering if it's an appropriate time to perhaps look at this again, please.
Yes, if you'd like to have visits to any of our plants in Monmouthshire, then we can organise that for you. But the visit to Viridor in Cardiff has been something that you've requested for some time. We did have a date back from them, but unfortunately it clashed with one of our Strong Communities meetings. I think it might have been this meeting today. So we've gone back to them and asked for some further dates. But yeah, we'll get a sort of visit to Viridor hopefully in this side of summer, and if there's any other places you want to visit, I'm sure it's not a problem.
Could I come back on that, Chair? Could I come supporting Councillor Webb? I know that there's been a trial in the north of the county of separating glass and taking the rest of the recycling materials separately, which gives the opportunity for our recycling body to really look at what they're going to start to pull in terms of the plastic will be separate from the glass, and for them to look feasibly at why and how we can deal with this, because it's a big news item. This council has moved in the last council to restrict use of single plastic bottles in the authority. I know there were some references from some members of the public, but I believe this, we have done it as a council. A motion went through council, but yes, it's something we need to follow up.
Thank you, and I think we all agree that it's an issue that is, very much top of our own minds. And as a new member, I think it would be extremely valuable to visit the facility that we have. So, any other comments on the forward work programme? So, if we can now move on to agenda item 10, which is the Cabinet and Council forward work programme, which I'm sure we all keep a very close eye on. Hazel, is there anything you'd like to highlight on? Not specifically. No? Any issues that anybody would like to raise? Okay, we just all need to keep a close eye on that. And if I can confirm the date, we're now not having the special meeting on the 9th of April, so we do look forward to those items, because obviously they're very important issues. And only last weekend I was rang up on Sunday morning by a resident where a lorry driver was trying to go up a lane that said no HGVs and knocked everybody up in the street at 1 o'clock in the morning so they could move their cars and he could get his lorry up the lane. So I think these are extremely important to our residents. So we look forward to hearing when we can revisit those. So the next meeting is the 24th of May. And can I just thank everybody for their participation today, to our officers for all their hard work, and also to Councillor Sarah Jones, the portfolio holder, for coming along and giving us a valuable insight. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and have a lovely Easter, everybody.